Welcome, everyone, to the Zorich podcast. I am Chris Zorich, and on today's show, we have a true Notre Dame legend, an All-American and academic All-American. How about that one? Super Bowl champion, NFL MVP, entrepreneur, and this, I think, is going to be very, very unique. Probably the only person literally in the world to have played in Super Bowl 17, won Super Bowl 18, and announced Super Bowl 19, the one and only Joe Theismann. Hello, sir.
Chris, how are you? It's good to catch up with you. Thank you,
sir. I'm pretty sure no one has ever done that. No one's ever played.
Actually, one person has, and that was Jack Kemp. Jack Kemp actually played in at that time, I think they were championship games when he was with the Buffalo Bills, and he wound up broadcasting a championship game. I think we're the only two, and we won Super Bowl 17. We lost Super Bowl 18. And that year, Roone Arledge was rooting for us against the Bears in '84 because he didn't want me not to be in the broadcast booth. I actually replaced O.J. Simpson in the booth. I was with Frank Gifford and Don Meredith. I mean, I've worked with so many great people. I worked with Pat Summerall when my partner Mike Patrick, who I worked with for many years, had to take a leave of absence for a little health issue. And I worked with Pat for a little while. I mean, the broadcasting, the people I had a chance to work with in broadcasting were, the same quality type people that I had a chance to play professional football with.
That is unbelievable. Well, we're actually going to get into that, but it's really interesting because not only have you run a restaurant, been an entrepreneur, you actually have a recent book. How to be a champion every day, 6 timeless keys to success. So in order for me to get prepared for this interview, I read it. It's a great book.
See, it's a simple little read, isn't it? 162 pages. Put it in your pocket, put it in your coat pocket, and take it everywhere you want to go.
It is awesome.
Whatever thing you carry, your briefcase, doesn't matter.
It is really good. And what's great is that a portion of the proceeds goes to St. Jude, so that's awesome. And folks will be able to actually get a link in the description in the show notes over to Amazon to buy it. So I mean, we're a full-time operation here.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Well, I think it's really interesting because in the book you talk about how one moment in time doesn't define a person. You talk about being a champion, you talk about leadership. So we're actually going to dive into that. But I think what's really great is I want to hear about your childhood because a lot of folks might not know that when little Joey was growing up, he may not have had a baseball that other folks know what a baseball looks like, or a bat, or a football. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I grew up in South River, New Jersey, a little town about 1 square mile big. Grew up 2 blocks from my high school. So if my parents ever wanted to look for me, they could very simply just walk out the front porch, out the front door, make a right-hand turn, in 2 blocks I'd be either on a baseball diamond, a basketball court, a football field, playing stickball against the school wall. I mean, that's where my life was. And I was just a skinny little kid growing up, and my mom and dad's combined income was $12,000, but yet I wanted for nothing. We lived with my grandmother. My cousin Billy lived next door. He was a second baseman. I was a shortstop. He was one of the guards on the basketball team. So we all sort of grew up together.
Wow.
Just a little side note, my wide receiver in high school was a guy by the name of Drew Pearson, who's being inducted in the Hall of Fame this year. So I'm so excited for Drew going in. But what we would do is because you couldn't have everything else, and I'd get a baseball, and then of course the cover would come off the baseball, and we get some tape and tape up the baseball, and then I had we used to use black electrician's tape, and I used to wrap it up, and then I had a baseball, and then I had a bat, and then when we cracked the bat, you put a nail in it, you tape it up, and you had another bat. The football when the cover came off the football and the laces fell apart, the first thing you did to lace it back was get some shoestrings. So you'd use a shoestring. And then if the bladder came off, or the cover came off, you throw the bladder around. I mean, and I never thought of it back then. It's, of course, obviously times are different today, but I had what everybody else had. Mine was in a little bit of a different mode than others, I guess you could say, but it didn't stop us from enjoying the things we enjoyed. We played, we used to throw rubber balls against the curbs, and if it hit right, it would go over somebody's head and you'd have a home run, or just if the guy caught it, it was an out. We had all these different things that we did outside as kids.
Well, you mentioned Drew Pearson. So the idea of having a quarterback and receiver tandem when you guys were little, and I mean, to be two of the greats in NFL history, I mean, how does that, were there other kids in the neighborhood? Did other kids, I mean, did folks in your neighborhood get scholarships a lot or go to college? We had
other guys get scholarships to different schools. It just turned out that, fate would take me one direction, and obviously took Drew to where he belongs. Up until last year, Drew was the only member of, I think, the 1980 decade team that hadn't been in the Hall of Fame, and now he is. And wow. I can't tell you how excited I was when I found out that he went in, and I'm excited to go see him get inducted. I mean, I've only been to Canton one other time, and that was for Coach Gibbs' induction and some of our players with the Washington. Actually, we were the Redskins, now the Washington football team, and so to me, it's come full circle for Drew, and I am so excited for him. And it's funny. I don't know about you, Chris, but I am. I have more guys I stay in touch with from my high school team than I do from college or even professional football. Wow. I've been gone about 36 years from professional football, but we always stay in touch. And as a matter of fact, I went to my 50th reunion, and
that's awesome.
it's funny. The one thing I noticed, and I'm sure many people out there that are watching, if you've gone to a reunion that is 50 years gone by, the guys don't change that much facially. The girls, which they were at that time, and now the women, they do change a fair amount more. And it's just an incredible experience to go through. My wife and I went to my 50th, and it was like, I had to go. I mean, I just had to go to see everybody, and
absolutely.
Everything. Those are the dearest friendships that I have, are the guys and girls that I went to high school with. And, those are the memories. I think I call those the purest of memories.
Sure.
When we're young, there's no financial attachment to the experience that you have. I mean, if you're young out there and you're listening, enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
So you've made an interesting, you've had an interesting journey. So you actually came to Notre Dame, but you actually committed somewhere else. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your journey to Notre Dame and kind of who you were recruited by?
I was recruited by a lot of different schools. I was, I guess, a high school All-American. I don't know how the qualifications were. We didn't have a high school championship game. We were undefeated. Right.
And there you go.
The big game for us was against New Brunswick High School. And we got to play it at Rutgers Stadium in New Brunswick.
Wow.
So we had our own, stadium at South River High School. Now we got to play one at a college stadium, and it was exciting. And it was always against New Brunswick. It was always Thanksgiving Day, and it was a huge event in our lives because, like I said, where I grew up, you had all these little towns: East Brunswick, South Brunswick, Milltown, New Brunswick, Spotswood. They were all these little towns that were sort of woven into one another. Mm-hmm. And so for me, when I got a lot of opportunities to go to different schools, I chose 5 to go visit. I went to North Carolina, UNC, North Carolina State, Wake Forest, Penn State, and Notre Dame. Those were the 5 schools I visited. And I wound up signing at North Carolina State because my high school coach, a guy by the name of 𝐷𝐸𝐿𝐻𝐿, backed up Roman Gabriel when he was at North Carolina State. So I said, that sounds like a good place to go to school. So when I made the decision to go there, everybody would say, why did you want to go to North Carolina State originally? And I said, well, and I'm sort of I guess you could say a BSer a little bit. I said, do you realize that North Carolina State is one of only 3 universities that has an on-campus nuclear reactor, and I want to study nuclear physics?
Oh my God.
People would go, really? I go, no. Are you kidding me? I barely can spell those words.
Oh
So anyway, I wound up signing it to North Carolina State. All the recruiting stopped. And then I hadn't made the trip to Notre Dame. And they said, we'd like you to come out. I said, well, look, I've already committed. But at that time, we were a total independent school.
Right.
So if I decided to go someplace other than NC State, I wouldn't lose any years of eligibility.
Okay.
So I wind up flying out to South Bend, and Rocky Blyer is my host. Rocky Blyer and a guy by the name of Dan Harshman, 2 running backs. And what they did at the university, they didn't necessarily recruit specific to positions. They didn't recruit corners or wide receivers or linebackers. They recruited athletes.
Okay.
And then they made you something else. It wasn't until probably 5-6 years later they started getting more specific in the recruiting process. Okay. So we went and played basketball and met with the coaches. I was 160 pounds. I was a skinny little kid, 160 pounds. And so I fly back home to Newark, New Jersey. My dad picks me up. He says, what do you think? I said, I have to go to Notre Dame. He says, why? I said, Dad, I can only give you one explanation, and that is it feels right. Wow. And I contend this, Chris. I think that if we trusted our gut more than we do statistics or letting our head analyze everything, we probably would be a little bit better off in a lot of the decisions that we make in our lives. Because the gut really understands. And so, people say, why'd you go to Notre Dame? What was it? Was it I love Carolina blue.
There you go.
Notre Dame football. I mean, blue's my favorite color. So I wound up signing, and I went there, and I did something that it's carried me forward in my life. Is I decided to go to Notre Dame a week early, and spend some time with the coaches. And learn the offense, learn the terminology, because just like in a business meeting, you like things to go smoothly. Coaches like practices to go smoothly.
Exactly.
So I learned, and automatically I was one of 13 quarterbacks. There were 13 of us that were quarterbacks when I arrived at the University of Notre Dame. But yet I had invested that 1 week to sort of get to the front of the line.
Right.
And to me, I always look at it. Life's just a question of opportunities. Can you create opportunities for yourself, and then can you capitalize on them when they present themselves? And so I created the opportunity to be the first guy in line. Now the question was, could I keep it?
Right.
And so that's how I wound up at Notre Dame. It was a little bit of a different path. It seems like every place I've gone has been a little bit of a different path. Coming back to the NFL was different because I started in Canada.
Right.
So started my career as a punt returner in the NFL, and I wound up being a quarterback. So
right. I can't wait to talk about that. So when you're at Notre Dame, and obviously I'm gonna get to the 2 Texas games you participated in, but was there a place on campus that kind of you were able to kind of unwind and just kind of get away? I mean, talk about the grotto, the lake, things like that.
Well, we used to go to the huddle. I used to shoot pool.
Okay.
I shot pool all afternoon. I had my classes set up all year to finish at 1:00. Started early, finished at 1:00. During football season, it was for practice purposes. But then in the second semester, when we weren't in school,
right,
or we weren't in practice, I still kept it that way. And then I'd go like at 1:00 in the afternoon, my class would be done. I'd be in the huddle. I'd grab some lunch. I'd be in the huddle at 2:00, shot pool till 6.
Oh my God.
You had to make money somehow, Chris.
That's terrific. Oh my God, he's a pool star. That's great.
So I spent a lot of time shooting pool in the afternoons, and then I'd go over to the we used to have the Rockton Memorial. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the Convocation Center at that time.
Right.
And then after the Convocation Center was built, in the afternoon, I'd either shoot pool or I'd go play basketball.
Okay.
And then I'd go to the study halls. I wasn't a natural student, and I use the term natural. I had to work at my education. I had to study. I had to put in the extra time. And it's sort of been the story of my life. It's like if you want something, you've got to put the time in. But if you really want it bad enough, you have to put the extra time in.
Well, and you did, obviously. I mean, you're an academic All-American. So, I mean, that says something. Now, you were part during the time you're at Notre Dame, Ara was your coach.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about Ara, but also you have some great teammates.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity. Actually, Rocky Blyer was a guest on a podcast. He had some great stories. Tom Gatewood was also a guest on. And I know you guys have a great relationship. But can you talk a little bit about kind of what Ara meant to you and a lot of the guys during that time?
Ara was he's the only man, the only person, and except maybe my dad, that I revered him. I just felt I felt so lucky. And you don't know it when you're a college kid in college, you don't know. I mean, you don't really understand relationships. You know, the adults there are more like, you know, mid parents.
Sure.
They're making sure you get the class. They're making sure you get what they do. I mean, Ara was different. Ara was, I was always scared to death. Someone would come and say, "Hey, coach wants to see you in the office." I'm going, "Oh God, what did I do?" Then you start running through your mind.
Right.
What am I? And all it would be was, "Hey, how's your mom and dad?" And he would just have a simple conversation with you, and, you know, keep on studying, keep on doing what you're doing. And for me, you know, he had Coley O'Brien, who really quarterbacked the national championship game in 1966. He had this is when Terry was there, and of course Bob Belden, 3 quarterbacks, and myself. And I was the 4th. I was the freshman quarterback. And of course, when you're a freshman there, they just beat the living daylights out of you. The starters just beat the heck out of you. And then all of a sudden, Terry on a Friday afternoon, I think we're getting ready for Georgia Tech or Pittsburgh, he turns his knee. So Ara he's got Coley O'Brien, who quarterbacked before, Bob Belden, both senior quarterbacks, and me. And he puts me in the game. He puts me into practice. And then we open up, we win 2 big games, and then we tie USC my sophomore year.
Okay.
Because freshmen weren't eligible.
Right.
We played 1 freshman game, and that was against Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh. We rode the bus there and back. It was the first night game I ever played.
Wow.
And then, and so when it's funny, I always felt like when I walked into Ara's office, it was a papal visit for me. It was like, you know, do I kiss the ring? I mean, what do I do? As a matter of fact, I have at his 90th birthday, a bunch of us got there together. I think, Chris, you were there. For his 90th birthday, I have a picture of me kneeling down because Eric, he couldn't stand. I'm kneeling down in front of him, shaking his hand, and I swear it looks like I'm going to kiss the ring, which I would have more than happy have done. But awesome. We had both practices. He would stand in a tower in the middle of practice, defense on one side, offense on the other.
Right. And
I'd make a mistake, miss call, miss handoff or something, and I'd quickly glance up to see if he was looking. And he wasn't looking. He was looking the other way. And then all of a sudden, I get in the huddle. I break the huddle. I head to the line. He says, "Joe, don't make the same mistake again." It's like, how did he know?
Right. How did he see that?
How did he know? How did he see that? I was very blessed to be able to have the opportunity to play for Ara. That's just the way I felt about him. And like I said, he was a very, very special man. We played golf together over at South Bend Country Club a few times. And he told me once, and it's always stayed with me. It's funny, different people I know have said things to you or anybody out there listening, and they resonate with you at different times in your life.
Right.
Eric told me once, he said, golf is the greatest game of management. He said, it's all about management. You manage the wind, you manage the fairways, you manage the clubs, you manage the ball. What's your ball doing on that day? You manage the score, you manage the opponent. It's the ultimate game of management. And he was so right. It really is. If you can manage your way through a round of golf, you can probably manage your way through a lot of other things.
So you lost your junior year to the University of Texas, right?
Right. Cotton Spire. Jimmy Street was a quarterback. They probably threw 6 passes all year.
Okay. Right.
And that's when they had the wishbone down in Texas.
Right.
Cotton Spire makes a catch, and they wind up beating us our junior year, and they were ranked number 1 in the country. But that was the advent of Darrell Royal and the wishbone.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, it's kind of interesting because I want to make a transition to you having a great junior year, and then you were called to Roger Valdisere's office. And for folks who might not know who Roger Valdiserre is, first of all, shame on you. But
That's right.
He is literally the grandfather of sports information for colleges, universities. I mean, I think he's made like a gazillion Final Fours. I mean, he's done just an amazing, amazing job. But one of his first feats was a conversation that he had with you. Can you kind of share that with us? Because I when I read it, it was hilarious. I can only imagine being there.
It really is something. So the beginning of my senior year, Roger calls me in the office and he says, Joe, he said, how do you pronounce your last name? I said, it's Theismann. He said, no, actually it's pronounced Theismann. I said, no, Roger, it's pronounced Theismann. He said, no, Joe, your last name is pronounced Theismann. I said, give me the phone. I picked up the phone. I called my dad back home in Jersey. And my father's, classic Jersey. You get him on the phone. And I said, Dad, I got a question for you. He says, fire away, Joe. I said, Dad, tell me, how do you pronounce our last name? And there's like this pause on the phone. My dad comes on. He says, are you all right? If you're a senior in college, you don't know how to pronounce your last name. I said, Dad, just tell me. I'll explain it later. He said, it's Theismann. Hung the phone up, turned to Raj. I said, Raj, look, my last name is Theismann. I know. I just got the phone with my dad. He said, Joe, I want to tell you something. There's a trophy out there called the 𝐼𝐢𝐿t𝐴 Trophy. It goes the best college football player in the country. We think you have a chance to win that trophy, but we're not just going to count on your athletic ability, nor the reputation of the University of Notre Dame. But we think by just simply changing the pronunciation of your last name from Theismann to Theismann to rhyme with Heisman, we can get you that trophy. And that's how I became Joe Theismann. There were the buttons and the bumper stickers, Theismann for Heisman, all that kind of stuff. Even to this day, Chris, people come up and say, what's it like to have a trophy named after you? And, I tell them, I say, hey, look, if it was named after me, I would have lost it for class.
That would have became a number 2, right?
But that's how. But here's the other part of it. And my grandmother was the matriarch of our family. My grandmother lived to be 102. Oh. And so what I did just to make sure is I called my grandmother up, and very, very hard, strong German accent. I said, Granny, they want to change the pronunciation of our last name from Theismann to Theismann. She says, well, I tell you this. She says the correct pronunciation is Theismann, and actually what they want to do is closer than what we have now. So, so I got a blessing from my grandmother, and actually it was the first time. I've been involved in a lot of firsts, I guess you could say. It was the first time that any public relations operation at a university really tried to sell an athlete. I remember years later, Joey Harrington, they had like a 13-story painting of him when he was at Oregon, I believe, or someplace something like that. And that's when all the promotion started. And as it turns out, Jim Plunkett was the Heisman Trophy. But that was a year, I call it the year of the quarterback. People like to talk about 83 as the year of the quarterback. Yeah, Jim Plunkett at Stanford, Dennis Dummett at UCLA, Chuck Hickson at SMU, Danny Pastorini at Santa Clara, Rex Kern at Ohio State, Archie Manning at Mississippi, and I was at Notre Dame. That was our senior class when I was in college, and it was just and Arch and I finished second, Archie finished third, and we did a shoot in Chicago on a sport magazine. Okay, and we exchanged jerseys. I think Archie told me his mom still has his jersey. I can't seem to find Archie's.
That's great. Well, and can you tell us, I mean, this is a historic game for Notre Dame folks, and it's playing Texas in the Cotton Bowl his senior year. Earl Campbell was the running back. Am I correct?
Yep.
And I mean, he was please, I mean, just kind of talk about the game, because that's one of the most historic games in the history of Notre Dame.
Well, it's funny. I don't remember a lot of it, but there's certain. First of all, it was the wishbone that Texas ran. They made it famous. It was the wishbone. It was, they were the dominant team running the football. And Ara had come up with a scheme. Coach Schultz, actually our defensive coordinator, I think, came up with the scheme that we were going to everybody was going to take a man. They were going to beat the living daylights out of the fullback, just beat them to a pulp, which they did. Steve Worcester was the fullback. And then what we do is the linebacker would be responsible. Somebody would be responsible for the quarterback. Somebody would be responsible because they didn't throw the football. Mm-hmm. They just never threw the football. And we're rolling along. I mean, we're really rolling along in the first half. And all of a sudden, I get hit on the elbow and the ulnar nerve right here.
Right.
right there. And I can't feel the last 3 fingers on my hand. I can't grip the football. So we wound up actually, Tommy Eaton went in to throw a pass at the end of the first half because I couldn't. So, no, it was Jimmy Yoder. I'm sorry. Jimmy Yoder goes in and throws it. And so I wind up sort of trying to push the ball around the second half. And I'm on my way to Hawaii for the Hula Bowl.
Wow.
And I can't throw a football. I guarantee you, I got there and everybody said, this guy's an All-American. Guy can't throw a football. He can't throw 5. Everything went like this. The ball just sort of fluttered around all over the place.
Jeez.
And so, but that second game was just unbelievable. And then, like I said, the first one we lost because they threw the football. The second one, it was a great concept to be able to defend the wishbone. A little bit like, it's funny, and I having to sort of move ahead a number of years. When Coach Gibbs was in Washington, we were in Washington together. We played the Chicago Bears in that vaunted 46 defense of theirs.
Right.
I need to tell you about it. But, Joe came up with a way to defeat the 46 defense. We actually ran at the 2 linebackers. Instead of running away from them, we ran at them. And actually, it was crazy. You'd think that with that much talent and that team,
military, right? Exactly.
Forget it. I can close my eyes, Chris. Mike Singletary, Otis Wilson, Wilbur Marshall, Fitz Perry, Richard Dent, Steve McMichael, and Dan Hampton. I can see all 7 of them. You know what? I can see all 7 of them like they're right here. You know why? It's all day they were right here. I got to tell you. But I tell you. But yet, Coach figured out a way after we played him a couple times. He figured out a way to, to run the football, keep the down and distance more manageable. And, it was an innovation by a coach that really allowed us to be able to do certain things. And of course, what Ara and Coach Schultz did with Texas was the same thing. But it was the first time Notre Dame had gone to a bowl in a number, 40, 50 years, whatever it might be. Right. And Ara created it was interesting because we were either going to go to the Orange Bowl or the Cotton Bowl.
Okay. And
he created a panel of sophomore, juniors, and seniors. And he basically asked us, what do we thought? And every one of us said, hey, look, we want to go play Texas. They're the number 1 team in the nation. I think we were 3.
Okay.
And so we want to go play them. And oddly, we beat them, and Nebraska winds up being number 1. And I saw Jerry Taggy, who was the quarterback in Nebraska a number of years ago. And I said, what ring are you wearing? He said, the one you gave me.
The one you gave me. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
That is terrific. It's interesting having a chance to be part of the Chicago Bears. Actually, growing up watching the Bears. In your book, you talk about a really kind of funny situation where I really looked at it as being a leader, right? A leader of men, a leader on the team. And this was one of the times that you play. Actually, I think it was a Super Bowl year, the year that the Bears went to the Super Bowl. You're playing in Chicago, and your punter went down.
Yep.
You kind of share that story with us because I think it was a great leadership moment, but it wound up being kind of an interesting moment.
It was stupid. Come on, be honest. It was ego over brain. I did this. I got to tell you, I'll take you back to Notre Dame. Okay. This is where it starts. So Wally Moore is our freshman coach at Notre Dame.
Okay.
And Ara obviously is our head coach.
Right.
So I'm the punter for the freshman team. We only have 1 game. We play Pittsburgh, but I'm punting in practice. And so Wally goes to Ara, right? And he says, hey, listen, this Theismann kid, or the Theismann kid, this kid can really punt. So they put me in a scrimmage, okay?
Oh my God.
20 yards, 26 yards. So Eric goes to Wally and he says, Wally, I want you to do this. He said, I never want you to bring anybody to me again who you think can do something.
Oh my God.
So I wind up, now we're playing Chicago in '85, 3rd game of the season. And a guy, Jeff Hayes is our punter. And he also kicks off for us. So we're up 10-0 on the Bears. We kicked the ball away from Willie Gault 3 times, fastest man in football. We're not taking a chance. Now we got a 10-point lead. We kick the ball to Willie. He catches it, runs it in for a touchdown. On that play, Jeff tears a thigh muscle. We don't have a punter. Coach Gibbs is sitting on the sidelines going, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I thought, I can punt. I mean, I've been practicing. I can punt. So I walked up to this coach. I said, you're looking for a punter? He said, yeah, I know what to do. I said, I can punt. He said, you can what? I said, I can punt. How hard can it be? Drop the ball, raise my foot. Boom, got it. Piece of cake.
Oh, my God.
So he says, fine. Next time we punt, you punt. So I go running on the field, and I'm thinking, I'm Joe Theismann punter. I'm not Joe Theismann quarterback. Get the ball on the 13-yard line, run a running play, gain 2 yards, second down and 8 to the 15. I look to the sidelines. Joe wants to throw a pass. I throw it incomplete. I got a relationship with the punter now. 3rd and 8 wants me to throw another one. Bounce this one in the ground. 4th and 8, we got a punt. And you know what it's like. The special teams come running on, offense comes running off, and the guys are going, hey, Joe, kick it right. I'm going, don't worry about it. Got this. So the ball's on a 15-yard line. I'm on a goal line in Soldiers Field. Now I'm looking up. I'm going, man, this is the greatest moment of my life. I'm a punter in the National Football League. And this is the first thought I had was Danny White did it because he did in Dallas. I said, Danny White can do it. I can do it.
Why not?
So I get the snap, and have you ever had your world go into slow motion? The instant that ball touched my hand, there was the roar of the crowd was like, this gurgling sound. And I'm thinking, my teammate said, kick it right. So I kicked the ball. It goes flying off my foot. It hung in the air, went 16 yards. I'm back 15. So I basically have a net 1-yard punt. Now, I claim to be the worst punter in the history of professional football. Now, Sean Landetta at the same spot roughly in Soldiers Field is credited with the shortest punt at -6 yards, I believe. But I contest that he never touched the ball. So I am claiming the crown of worst punter in the history of the National Football League. But the funny part is and not too many people realize this, I go jogging to the sidelines. Now, Coach Gibbs has got his ear set on, right? And at that time, they weren't wireless. And so I'm walking towards the sidelines like this, and Coach is over here, and I'm walking towards the sidelines, and all of a sudden I see him walking, and I start to veer because I know he's on the spring. Okay? So I don't want to be confronted by the coach. So I go and sit down. We get them off the field, and I walk up to him, right? And I'm standing there, and he's all engrossed in his plays, and he says, I said, what do you want to run, Coach? He says, I want to run spread right, short motion, 60 outside. And then I started chuckling. I said, you want me to punt again? And he looks at me, and he had these big glasses. And he pushed his glasses up, and he went, I never want to hear the word punt come out of your mouth again. And I retired with my 1-yard average. I still laugh. Every time I think of walking up to Joe, I just laugh. I mean, what's going through his mind? This guy really asked me. He's kicked the ball 1 yard. He's going to ask me, would I like to punt again? Are you kidding me?
That is hilarious. You are listening to the Zorich podcast with our guest, Joe Theismann, author of How to Be a Champion Every Day. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So you've had a chance to write several books, and why this one now?
It's interesting. And nobody's ever asked me that, Chris, to be honest with you. Why now? I've been speaking for over 40 years. And it all started right after we won the world championship in '82. I started attending a lot of corporate functions, and I found out that the same things that we talked about in football were the same things that everybody talked about in business. They talked about opportunities. They talked about goals. They talked about attitude. They talked about teamwork. They talked about motivation. Well, heck, that's our world. I mean, that's the world of football, the world of athletic competition. And so I started including it all in my speeches. And then finally, I decided to put it down on paper. And I started it now 5 years ago. It took me almost 4 years to write it. It's like any project. You get started and you're all excited, and then you get sidetracked or distracted.
Right.
Life gets in the way, and then all of a sudden you don't really want to finish. Finally, guy by the name of James Malinchak, and James does a lot of coaching as a speaker, teaches people how to handle finances, write books, and all kinds of things. And I've done things for James. And he was after me. When are you doing the book? When are you going to finish the book? And it's like, so finally I gave him a deadline. I said, December 2017. I said, 2018. I will finish the book by the end of the year. And I did. And so I took all of the stories and lessons that I've learned. And, it's not all me in the book. Obviously, General Powell, he talks about leadership in it. I have different friends of mine that have contributed, different experiences that I've had. And I think sometimes the best way for people to relate is to sort of live vicariously through you a little bit and see the mistakes that you've made. And you say, look, this was a mistake. Don't find yourself going down this path. Right. And I never tell people what to do. It's even in the presentations. I don't tell them. These are suggestions. Right. I call myself Joey Appleseed. What I want to do is I want to throw some seeds out there. Sure. Take a look at writing down goals. We write them down in sports. We write them down in business. But like 98% of the people in this world today refuse to take a pen in hand and write down a goal. You know why? Because it gives you a chance to change your mind. Mm-hmm. It gives you an out. Absolutely. So, write it down, basically. So that's one of the little things. And so I took the speeches to a large degree and the speech and sort of put it into a book form. And I also, hardest thing I've ever done, Chris, I did the audio book myself. Wow. 4 recording sessions, 2 sessions for corrections of mispronunciations and everything else. But it was absolutely the most tedious and hardest thing I've ever, but I'm very glad I did it. I'm so thrilled and happy that I had a chance to do that. And the audiobook is available as well. You just log online and you can find it there. And it's great for driving around or reading and whatever, like riding in the car if you got a trip or something. I think you'll find the stories hopefully entertaining. It certainly was for me. I laughed at some of them when I recalled some of the things that it really happened in my life. But, that's what it's based off of. It's based off of the presentations that I've done for 2,000 plus companies.
See, and it's great because I enjoyed reading it. Now I'm going to go out and get the audio book. And again, like I mentioned before, there'll be a link in the description, also the show notes for folks who want to check it out. But it was great because you kind of covered your childhood and kind of the successes you had, not being defined by one moment. But one of the things, and I'm a big country music fan, and one of the things that you mentioned was "Live Like You Were Dying," which is a song by Tim McGraw. Right. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about that story, because it was really, really good? Well,
there's two references. One is Whitney Houston, One Moment in Time, where we all, if you won a world championship, you know what that one moment is like. Or maybe it's the birth of a child. Whatever that one moment in time is for you, it stays with you forever. And then Tim McGraw's was, "Live life like you're dying." And what was so impressive to me about, first of all, the story of the book or the story of the song, but more importantly, the meaning of the song. It's like we go through life, and this pandemic is sort of a classic example of that. I contend that we would still be doing the same thing a year later that we did before this pandemic hit. We would all be in that same mode of life. What this thing did is it changed our lives, and I call it opportunity more than change. It gave us an opportunity to look at life differently, to look at our relationships with our families, our spouses, our business associates. But even more importantly, Chris, it's given us an opportunity to look at the relationship with ourselves. And what that song basically says to me is, if the doctor came to you and said, "You've got 6 months to live," what would you do? How would you live your life? Would you live it the way you're living it, or would you live it differently? And if you would live it differently, what are you waiting for? And that's sort of the thing is life is to be embraced. It's to be lived. And if you wait for something to happen, you may wind up being late to the game. And so to me, that's what made, that's one of my favorite songs. And it sort of has a meaning to it more than just being a favorite song.
Well, and one of the things you also talked about in the book, which I don't know if a lot of people really kind of understand this type of situation, but you talk about not being defined by one moment. And obviously the moment I'm talking about is when you were playing the Giants and your leg was broken. And it just wasn't broken. I mean, I don't want to rehash everything, but the idea that I really got from it, it was interesting because you had a really interesting take on it. and how this moment is not going to define you. And I think what folks don't know is there was a later conversation that you had with Lawerence Taylor.
Yeah.
And can you share with us that conversation, because he learned something at that time as well?
Yeah, it was obviously the injury was, it's sort of been recorded in time. I think I actually believe it changed the way injuries are presented today. I mean, I know they replayed mine a lot from what I understand.
Absolutely.
And now they go to commercial right away. And
Right.
Instead of just saying, hey, this is gruesome, and then they show it, they sort of avoid it and they bring people up to date, which I think is absolutely wonderful.
Right.
I didn't want to be defined as a guy with a broken leg. I didn't want that moment to define me that way, although that moment changed my life in so many ways. I had being an MVP of the league, being a world champion quarterback, a man of the year. Heck, Chris, in 1984, and there's different reports that I've read, I was either the highest paid player, including bonuses in the National Football League, or the fourth highest in salary, which was at $1 million a year.
Wow.
Which sort of pales by comparison today. You know what? I am thrilled for the guys today. You get everything you can get. If owners are out there, or people are out there, owners, if they're willing to pay you that kind of money, go get it. You're not going to turn it down and say, no, it's maybe not quite as much. Maybe it's a little more than I thought. No. So after I go through the process with my leg, and I go into pretty good depth with it as far as how it affected me. About 4 years after that, LT was still playing for the Giants, and he had a bar restaurant up in Jersey, and he asked me to come up. And I know in Chicago and Washington and different cities around the country, you have like Monday evening, they host something like a restaurant or bar. A player hosts, somebody coming in and talking about the game or whatever.
Right.
So he invited me up to New Jersey. We sat down and they played the injury behind us on a TV. Neither one of us looked at it. And I turned to Lawerence and I said, we're going to be connected to this thing forever. We know how it affected me. It ended my career. How did it affect you? He said, Joe, I learned a great lesson that night, that no matter how great you are at what you do, it can be over in an instant. And that's why every day, every play, you have to live life to the fullest. And you have to be able to go at it with everything you have, because there's no guarantees for tomorrow. I thought it was very prophetic. But there is another story, too, about what happened when I was in the hospital. Lawerence called on Tuesday morning.
Right.
How I was doing. So he calls, the nurse comes walking in. She says, Mr. Theismann, Mr. Taylor's on the phone. Would you like to speak to him? I said, yes, I would. So I pick up the phone. I go, hey, LT, is that you? He says, yeah, Joe, how you doing? I said, not very well. He says, why? I said, why? You broke both bones in my leg, for crying out loud. He said, well, you have to understand something. I don't do things halfway. Got to go to practice. Talk to you later.
That was the call.
That was the phone call. It was nice of him to call. I got, that's all I say. But And then the other thing is too is we've played golf together, and I won't let him stand where I can't see him.
That's great.
He's not allowed to stand behind me on the left side. He has to be in front of me where I can see him at all times.
You mentioned Joe Gibbs. Can you talk to us about the relationship you had with him? Yeah,
well, it was in the beginning. There wasn't a relationship. I wasn't his. It was funny. I was watching TV last night, and they were talking about Sam Darnold.
Okay.
And of course, the new coach with the Jets,
right? Sam
Darnold wasn't his. Right. It's not his choice. So now he's gone. Now he's in Carolina. But I wasn't Joe's choice. And I was in a restaurant business. I owned at one time. I owned the Washington. It was the Washington. It was the Redskin Report. It was our newspaper.
I didn't know that.
For a while. And so, but I had a lot of different things going on. I had TV shows, radio shows, restaurants, and so we're 0-5. We lose to San Francisco, and I drive to Joe's house. I know they're not going to get rid of him. They just hired him. I'm next, the next person is on the it's me. So I actually drove to Joe's house, and we sat down. I guarantee he was the most shocked man in the world. He used to sleep at Redskin Park 3 nights a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean, he was so committed. And the coaches were up till 3-4 o'clock in the morning. Friday when you walked into the meetings, coaches looked like zombies. I mean, they were up all night. They'd all known each other for a long time. They'd all worked together at different places from time to time. And it was brutal. People ask me about coaching. Hey, no way. I watch Joe Lawerence coach. I watch Joe Gibbs coach. I don't want any part of coaching.
Wow.
I don't mind mentoring. I don't mind teaching, but I'm going home.
Right.
So I walk into his house. I knock on the door and I said, Coach, we got to talk. Because Chris, I guarantee you've been in a meeting. And in our meetings, when there's quarterbacks, there's only 3 of us. And when you're in a meeting and you get the sense that you're the starting quarterback and the coach isn't talking to you, it's not a good feeling. So we sit down and I said, hey, look, he says, I need a guy who's totally committed to me being my quarterback, Joe. He says, you have restaurants, you have these other activities. And I said, Joe, I'll get rid of everything if you want, but give me a chance. Just give me a chance. And oddly enough, it was the Chicago Bears that changed the tide for us. We went to Chicago, the 6th game. 𝐕𝐡𝐞 recovered a fumble. Or Dave Butts recovered a fumble. 𝐕𝐡𝐞 intercepted a pass. I think we won like 13-3 or 17-7 or something like that. And that started a run for us where we went 8-3 the rest of that year. 12-1 won the championship. 16-3 went back to the Super Bowl. 11-4 missed the playoffs again. The Bears knock us out. And then I wind up getting hurt in 85. But going to Joe's house changed my life completely. And we went, from there it was like, off we went. We changed our offense.
Okay.
He had brought in the Don Coryell, throw the ball all over the place offense from San Diego, and it just wasn't us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where sort of the Hogs got their names, and that's where it was created. It's funny that the Giants have always been sort of, I guess you could say, the line of demarcation in my life. Okay. But it seems like the Bears have always been the ones. It's like when we in 81, it was the Bears we beat that made it okay. Right. Right. And then getting knocked out of the playoffs to go to broadcasting, we lose to the Bears in Chicago. And I'll tell you something, that 46 defense, man, those athletes, I don't know if there's ever been a greater group of athletes. Now, people will talk about, obviously the Baltimore Ravens and, had an unbelievable group, but not like those 7 guys up front. And then, obviously 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and the secondary, Durson and those guys. That was the greatest collection of athletes I've ever seen. I see Richard all the time at different golf things, and Dan looks great. Dan looks like he's could be a tight end now.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I got there in 91, and there were probably, I want to say, almost half the team was from the 85 Bears. Yeah. I mean, Joe Terry was still there. William Perry was still there. Richard was still there. Ron Rivera was still there. I mean, you had guys, and so you can imagine as a kid growing up in Chicago, having the chance to be a part of that team was just kind of.
I got to ask you a question. I know this is your podcast, and I guarantee you nobody asks you questions, but I'll ask you one. When you were a kid growing up, okay, were you always a defensive guy?
It's really funny. I was actually never allowed to play football. I mean, there were kids in my neighborhood. We played in the neighborhood, but we didn't have Pop Warner or anything like that. And I was walking through the halls of my high school my freshman year, and the varsity coach comes up to me and goes, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Well, my name is Chris." He's like, "Are you a student here?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why don't I know you? Like, what year are you?" I was a freshman. He was like, "Wait, hold on. You're one of the biggest kids in school, and I don't know what the hell's going on here." So that kind of led to him wanting me to play. And my mom was like, "Absolutely not. I don't want him to get hurt. He's not going to play." And my high school coach was pissed. He hated it. And so what I did, I mean, I liked being around the guys. And the guys from around the team were really cool. And I liked hanging around them. And I wanted to hang around with them more. So my sophomore year rolled around. I asked my mom. She said, "Absolutely not." So I forged my mom's name on the permission slip. Wow. And I was able to play. And of course, you're getting home later and later. And she was like, "What are you doing at school? I thought you were supposed to be home at 3 or 4." And I was
studying.
Like, I was involved in extracurricular activities. So, she bought that up until the time when I bought like my shoulder pads or some pants home that were reeking of odor. And she found out I was playing and she started crying. She's like, look, I'm trying to raise you in this environment. It's crazy. Got all this stuff going on. I need you to listen to me. You're not listening to me. And I explained to her, like, this is the first time I was around positive people. I mean, folks were setting goals.
Sure.
I was around positive men, and I hadn't had that in my life. So that was kind of the long story of me being able to play. But then as a kid, I remember my mom and I always watching the Bears game on our old little black and white TV with the antenna with the aluminum foil.
Sure.
And she was a crazy rabid Bears fan. And unfortunately, she passed away a couple of months before I got drafted by the Bears. But it was an amazing experience.
Now, one last question for you, because I know this is your podcast. I just became a co-host. That's all.
that's no problem.
I'm sorry. I do these things. But I say, oh yeah, there he is again.
You've been doing this for years, so
who was your favorite Bear?
Okay, so this is not fair. Like, I think that I sent you these questions beforehand. So growing up, I wore number 50 in high school. And it was because of Mike Singletary, because I read a book he had made called Calling the Shots. I don't know how I remember all this. But I really identified with him because he was short. A lot of folks kind of weren't that excited about him kind of going in the first round when he got drafted. He went in the second round. Right. He had this just this fire. And it was interesting because one of the things, and this is so weird, but he got real excited during games and he actually almost tired himself out. Mm-hmm. And I did the exact same thing. And when I was reading it, he talked about how after practice he would get on the treadmill, or excuse me, the exercise bike, and he would go for like an extra half hour. And so literally he was conditioning himself to not be as excited, as exuberant during the games. Right. And I was like, oh my God, this is me. This speaks to me. I did the exact same thing he did. Fast forward, 6-7 years? Right. I get drafted by the Bears. I meet him. I take a shot. I'm showering. Like, I look over and I'm showering. I was like, oh my God, I've died and gone to heaven. I mean, this is having a chance to play the game you love, the game you respect, with someone that you admire so much. I mean, I literally felt as though I was living the dream of every fan out there who was a baseball fan, who wanted to be like Babe Ruth, who wanted to be like anybody you can name, Muhammad Ali for boxers, anybody that had that chance to be around their idol. I mean, I was 21 years old. I could have died and gone to heaven because I achieved that goal.
Chris, I can relate to that, and I'll tell you a quick story. I don't believe this one's in the book. In 1974, George Allen trades the number 1 pick to the Miami Dolphins for my rights. I got drafted by Miami, wound up going to Toronto for 3 years, loved the city of Toronto. Would have never left, except they decided to economically not pay players at that time. So I wound up getting traded for. I joined the Washington Redskins at that time in 1974. Right. We're playing the Jets. Joe Namath is my idol. I grew up in Jersey. I mean, I used to walk around hunched over, and I used to hit my shoulder like so. I emulated him.
Oh my God!
I idolized him. He broke his jaw, and he put this giant face mask on. I changed my face mask. He wore white shoes. I wore white shoes. Oh. He had a llama skin rug. I went to a drugstore and bought a bath rug. And, that was my llama skin rug. I did it all. Same thing. So now we're playing the Jets and Shea. And there he is I'm in my uniform. He's on the other side of the field. And I could care what anybody else was doing. I watched him walk off the field. I watched him sit on the sidelines. I couldn't even tell you the name of the game, nothing going on. So I'm sitting there. And all right, now the game's over. And I jog across the field and I walk up to him and I go, Hi, Mr. Namath. I'm Joe Theismann. Do you want me to carry your helmet to the locker room for you?
Wow.
His helmet to his locker room.
That's
and it's
hilarious.
Like, no, it's okay, son. And and I know you feel the same way. It's really special. And Joe was sort of, I guess you could say, the first person that I met that had that kind of influence on my life. Is if you're going to be appreciated by someone, if someone is going to look up to you, you want to be able to be someone they can be proud of. and say that I look up to this individual. And that's the way Joe was for me. He was courteous. He was always gracious. I've been around him umpteen times. He's done so much good. The institute that he has down in Florida to treat PSTD and other things with hyperbaric chambers and brain problems. It's just unbelievable how much good he does. And we've been friends for, gosh, a lot of years, and I appreciate him. But it's like you with Mike. I mean, all of a sudden there he is in real life. It's like this person actually is real. It's not a figment of my imagination.
Right. And it was interesting because I was always told, and I still think about this to this day, people say, be careful what you wish for. And spending some time with him, being on the field, I remember one game I got in as a rookie, and I got in the huddle, and Mike Singletary called a play, and I was like, oh my God, this is Mike Singletary giving me a play. I lined up and he starts yelling my name, Chris. I'm like, oh my God, like TC, get me pumped. This is great. Chris. And it was like yelling more. I was like, man, I'm starting to get loud. He came up to me and said, you're in the wrong gap. And I was like, oh my God. But I mean, again, that was just kind of how hyped up I was. I know I'm going to let you go in a little bit, but I have a question. You have a question. You mentioned face mask. One bar. Please explain that to me. As a quarterback. Two reasons.
Number one is when I joined the Washington football team, I wore a gray double bar.
Okay.
Billy Kilmer and Sonny Jurgensen both wore single bars. Both quarterbacks were on the roster. And if I was going to be on the team, I basically had to wear a single bar. So, I wanted to fit in. Just, what that's all about.
Absolutely.
But more importantly, when I handed off, the double bars bothered me. So I went with a little bit of a lower single bar, hoping to protect my face. And then as it turns out, it just made it easier for me to see, and I could see over it. And I was the last non-kicker grandfathered in to be able to wear a single bar in the National Football League.
Wow.
Because I talk about all these crazy little firsts that I did. And, that was one of them. And, it's sort of the Giants and the Bears have been teams. Byron Hunt took my 3 front teeth out, and these are veneers. By the way, they're great. Dr. John Reddick, Memphis, Tennessee.
There you go.
But it was just to be a part, just to feel a part of it. I think that's the thing, is one of the hardest things for young players to do on a football team or any athletic team, or actually a classroom or in life, is how do I fit in?
Right.
How do I fit into the situation I'm in? For me, I was a quarterback. Those two wore single bars. I was going to go with the single bar.
Wow. There's also a story that I'd like you to share with us about the advice that Mr. Cook gave you, ironically, before the 85 season.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was it's funny. It's like my life is just one story after another, it seems. And I'm sure many people are like that, but mine are just, so many of them are documented. At the end of the 84 season, before the 85 season, my contract was expiring. Jack wouldn't redo contracts. Mr. Cook wouldn't do that. He had a round house out in Middleburg, Virginia. And I didn't have an agent. I didn't have an agent for the first contract when I negotiated with the Dolphins. That was a huge mistake.
Wow.
The second time I did it without an agent wouldn't have mattered, because Mr. Cook was going to give me what he wanted to give me. Didn't matter who was sitting in the room or what I was going to ask for. And keep in mind, in 1982, we won the world championship. I made $235,000 as a base salary. In 1983, I'm the MVP of the league. We go back to the Super Bowl, and I make $265 as a base salary. So in 1984, I'd made 3 trips to his house. He has a round house. And every time I got there, they tell me, Mr. Cook isn't ready for your contract. He'd like you to meet him at the barn. We'd go ride his Tennessee Walkers, and we'd ride around a little bit.
Wow.
So finally I get there, and he wants to sit down. He opens up, just like you open up a computer. He opens up this binder in front of me, and it's a 5-year contract. Now I had a figure in mind, and it was I hadn't shared with anybody. It was in my mind is where the figure was. Like I said, it wouldn't have done any good. He was going to give me what he wanted to give me. So I opened it up, and it's $1.5 million bonus for making up for the previous years, $1 million a year for 5 years. And at that time, no money was guaranteed. And he looked at me and he said, "What do you think?" And I went, "Yeah, it exceeded what I was going to ask. I got to tell you that." So he looked at me and says, "What do you think?" I said, "Mr. Cook, this is incredible." He says, "No, it's not. It's fair and it's unbelievable." And that's the way Jack used to be. And he said, "I want to give you a piece of advice." And he hands me a business card. He said, "I want you to call this person and I want you to insure this contract." I said, "Mr. Cook, I've played for you now for about 10 years, never missed a game, never missed a practice. I'm going to be there." He said, "Joe, what you'll pay in a premium to insure this contract will be less than 0.5% of the total value of this contract. It would be a prudent decision." And he said, "I want to give you one other piece of advice. Do not deduct the premiums from your taxes. If you do and you get hurt, you will have to pay taxes. If you do not deduct the premiums, the money will all be yours. So you take this card, you make the phone call." A year later, I get my leg broken. And Lloyd's of London. Matter of fact, it was a year when I think Burt Jones got hurt. There were a number of us. Billy Sims got hurt that year. So there were a number of us that wound up, with insurance policies. But that was the best advice I'd ever been given, and it became, sort of the foundation of the finances in my life. And it was just, and I've been around different people. I've been around golfers. Right. And I asked him, I said, have you insured your hands? Well, why would I insure my hands? Well, let's say your finger gets slammed in a car door and you can't play golf. How much income do you anticipate losing? Geez, never thought of that. My agents never mentioned it to me. Well, hello. And I don't know how it works today. I'm sure it's the same thing. And teams will take out policies today. Right. I mean, what
I thought was so interesting was the actual owner and literally giving fatherly advice to players, right? And that does not happen. I mean, it didn't happen a lot when I played.
He only did only two players did their contracts in person with Jack, John Riggins and myself. We're the only. Everybody else had agents, and I don't know whether Jack ever dealt with them or not. But yeah, Mr. Cook was. And boy, when he used to come out to practice, Coach Gibbs, there were 3 chairs set up on a Wednesday afternoon.
Okay.
And we knew practice was going to be different. Bobby Beathard sat in one. He was the GM.
Okay.
Cook sat in the other. And the other one was for Coach Gibbs while we were in special teams or something where he'd talk about it. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, I just got a copy of a letter that was sent to George Allen from Edward Bennett Williams in 1975. Now, I didn't start until 1978.
Okay.
In 1975, the owners of the Washington Redskins at that time were not good. We had 3 quarterbacks that were making a lot of money at that time, and they wanted to save like $100,000. I mean, I was making, there was all minimum. So I could only keep 2 of us, and they suggested that I be the starting quarterback. Of course, George didn't listen, but it didn't matter. And I just it just became apparent to me that was the way it was. It's early back in 75, they were saying, "Hey, look, start the kid." And it took me 3 years to get on the field. And of course, I started my career as a punt returner. Wow. Started against the Giants. Like I said, it's the Giants and the Bears. They're different phases of my life. So I'm anticipating something really good happening, Chris, because you're a former Bear. So I'm anticipating something happening in my life here going forward. So I think I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I like to kind of make a little transition about kind of how you've been helping folks and kind of young people. But I want to talk about your relationship with St. Jude Hospital. But before that, I want to talk about one of the best speeches I've ever seen in my life, and that was at the SP Awards with
Jimmy Valvano.
Wonderful Jim Valvano. Can you just talk a little bit about the relationship you had with him? And one of the things I remember vividly when he was walking off the stairs is you kind of helping him.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing scene.
Jimmy and a guy by the name of Bobby Lloyd were guards at Rutgers University. Rutgers 15 minutes from my house back in South River. So I was aware of Jimmy Valvano because I'm an old sports fan. Baseball was my first love. Love that, our entire starting five in our high school basketball team all got scholarships to the same university offers.
Wow.
It was a great. We all grew up together. We all played Pop Warner ball together. We all played, freshman ball. We all, it sort of went that way. A group of guys stayed together. But that particular night with Jimmy, like I said, I'd known him before. We worked through the same speakers bureau, doing speeches, and so I was aware of Jimmy and the Italian in him and everything. It was just he was captivating. And that night, I remember him standing on the stage and. I was sitting in the front row and Jimmy gave his speech and I carry it, Chris, I carry it with me. I carry a copy of it. Hold on one second. Hold on. Wow. Just to tell you, I'm not kidding you.
Oh my God. I got the chills, Joe. That's wow.
There it is right there.
Wow.
That's the date. It's January of 1993. I carry the speech with me. Because it's such an inspiration. And he talks about three things being important in your life. And I remember sitting there and then he started to come off the stage and, I jumped up to try and help him. And it was, to me, one of those incredible moments. And, you dedicate your life to different things. St. Jude is another, the V Foundation. I host a thing called the Virginia Vine in Washington, where we raise money for the V Foundation for cancer research. I'm also a sports advisory board member of St. Jude's Children's Research Center. If you go to my website, you'll see where I have a list of things. I sign autographs. Autographs do cards, photos, helmets, pennants, jackets, you name it, I sign it. And all I ask for is a donation to St. Jude. I don't want any money for doing those things. Wow. But I wish I'd have done it a lot earlier in my career. Sure. And I hopefully probably would have been able to raise even more money. But, every little bit counts. St. Jude charges no one anything. You're there. The families and everybody are there. So to me, it's like, it's an opportunity to give back. Chris, I believe this 100%. And, I guess the older you get, the more introspective you get in life is we're put on this earth to serve, not to be served. Absolutely. And this gives me a chance to be able to try and do what I can to help the children and the families of St. Jude.
Amazing. Joe, look, you've been phenomenal. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. It's funny because I selfishly enjoy doing this podcast because I have a chance to talk to individuals who not only are historic figures at Notre Dame, but, and I'm going to be a little biased by saying this, but folks who have gone out and have done amazing things after Notre Dame. And I'm not just talking about folks who win Super Bowls. I'm just talking about people making a difference in our society. And selfishly, I have a chance to kind of spend an hour with somebody who's done that. So I do really, really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Joe.
Oh, Chris, it's my pleasure. Listen, good luck with the podcast. It's been a ton of fun. I look forward to seeing you at some games this year. Hopefully we'll all be there.
Absolutely.
And, it'll be, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
You got it. I want to thank everyone watching and listening to this episode of the Zorich podcast. And most of all, my wonderful wife and daughter team of Kylie and Candy, because I don't know what I'm doing and they help me direct and produce this. So this podcast, along with our other ones, are on my YouTube page at Chris Zorich 50, as well as on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Joe, again, thank you very much. And of course, go Irish.
You betcha, Chris. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.